That's Karen had her hand up first, so.
Hi, I tried to ask this in the other form, and as y'all know, I didn't have time. I am in favor of instituting tuition for public schools, starting at 10% per year. So the first year we would institute the program, the parents would pay 10% of the cost to educate each child, and then the next year it would be 20%, and so on. And I believe at the point of probably around 50 or 60%, people would start to see private school alternatives as very affordable. Right now, the parents are paying for daycare and everything. So I do believe we should have some kind of committee of, as Newt Gingrich suggested for immigration, to decide who should be able to stay and who should have to go back, to award scholarships for families who cannot afford to pay tuition for their children in the public schools. So I would like to know what each one of you thinks about the idea of charging so that we can get a better handle on local control of the school system. Thank you.
Okay, I've not heard a lot about that issue, but I would just say if we were going to do that, we would be double taxing our consumers of public education. We pay a tax through property tax, so unless you're suggesting that we get rid of property tax, which would be a fine thing, I would support that. And I'm not sure that that's the solution, because we're paying property tax and then we'd also be paying a tuition, and so we'd be double taxing all of our residents. I'm not sure that I could support something like that.
I would have to look into that. I have not had a discussion with anyone about that kind of an alternative to some of the problems we face. I'm sorry, you can't hear me?
I'm just toned down.
Oh, okay. You know, I do think there are a lot of very creative, that may be one. On the surface, it doesn't sound like something that, I know of too many other possible alternatives in terms of creative solutions to this problem of a government monopoly on schools, and the idea that in many cases we're expecting teachers and educational institutions to be babysitters in daycare. So I think that I would have to look into that particular. There's probably a half a dozen other approaches that have been brought to me, so that is certainly something that could weigh in the mix, but I think a creative approach to what we currently have that encourages those kinds of alternatives for people who are looking at homeschooling as we did, or looking at private schools as we did, or looking at staying in public school. As you know, my oldest daughter is a great advocate. She works in the inner city schools in Boston. She made a choice to do that. Frankly, at a lower income level to do it, but she has a real burden for kids. So she fits into that model of teachers seeing it as really a ministry. At the same time, I think they should be paid. I don't have any problem in a free market when you add value, being paid for that and expecting to be paid well for it. But the beautiful part of that is in a free market where there's not a monopoly, the taxpayer can say, well, let me tell you, I either do or don't value that. I either do or don't choose to pay you for it. And that's the way it works.
Thank you, Jeff. Steve?
Interesting question. I would say in order to look at something like that, or to even get to that point, you're talking about probably a restructuring of pretty much the entire system about how education is funded. It would be an overhaul of the property tax system, income tax system, and just pretty much everything. Not opposed to radical change or to looking at alternative possibilities, but the thing is it's not something I could see instituting immediately. It may be something to look at in the future. I'm close to the public education system because A, I'm a product of it, B, both my mother and father were teachers and a coach, and then my wife was a teacher and she served on the school board here in Cherokee County. So I know there's a big problem. I know there is a problem with funding public education, and definitely alternative solutions need to be explored. That's one of them. But if you're asking if I could support that immediately right now, my answer is no. But is it something that could be looked at with changes in the structure of how we fund? Yes, it's a possibility.
Sam?
I heard about that earlier when you asked that question, and I've more or less understood it as it is now. And I've actually thought about it since. And it's pretty complicated compared to where we're at now. As Nate mentioned, there is a pretty big jump between where we're at now and then. I like the idea of a possible free market solution where parents would be paying in for their own child's education. But I would have to think about that and sit down and figure out, can we get to a specific program that you're talking about, something general in that direction? I certainly would be for that, but as far as percentages and those exact details, that would take a lot of hashing out and finding out what the ramifications would be and kind of do there from here.
All right, thank you. Okay, we had a few other folks who had their hands up before, so we're going to get to everybody. So Dennis, did you have a question?
Yeah, Nate, you had talked about jobs, and this is really for everybody. What would you do for this district to increase the jobs here? That's, in my opinion, the only way to get this economy going, to get more people working, for more tax revenue, for more spending, for more job growth. What would you do specifically for this district?
We need to begin reaching out and sort of recruiting businesses to come here. We need to provide incentives for businesses, whether that be at the state level of some type of tax reductions, even some type of wage tax reduction, in order to get Georgia's economy moving. Because that's what it's going to take. I'm a big believer in Reagan's theory of trickle-down economics. Let's tax the corporations less, get the money flowing to the people, and then the money will be distributed to the people. So incentives for businesses to come to this area. As far as a local level, I would like to work in conjunction with the commissioners in order to incentivize businesses to come to this area. Our development authority, things like that. Cherokee County has great potential. We are on the border of Atlanta's growth district. It's coming our way. We can take huge advantage of that. And as we take advantage of that, jobs will be provided to the citizens of Cherokee County. We suffered greatly in the last real estate bubble burst because our county was primarily a construction-based industry. We had a lot of folks in this county who were working in that industry. And when it burst, a lot of people were hurting. And so we need to diversify our county's job market. And that, again, is providing incentives for these businesses, these corporations, things like that to come into Cherokee County so that our folks do have a job.
All right, thank you, Nate. Secondly, we have one other question.
I think there was a question.
Oh, was that a question to everybody, Dennis? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, he did that.
Go ahead.
Sam, do you want to?
Very sneaky.
No. Just be quiet. I'll go ahead. No, Sam doesn't want to talk about this, so let me talk about it.
Government doesn't create jobs. That's how I see it. Government doesn't create jobs. How do you bring jobs in, though? How do you improve it? You get rid of corporate income taxes, personal income taxes, property taxes. And instead of playing favorites, instead of saying, oh, this business we really like, we're going to give them a tax break so they can come in. But that means that the taxpayers have to make up for that tax break. I don't like that. No one else should. So why don't we get rid of all those taxes so all the businesses want to come in? I think instead of picking favorites, which the government's horrible at, we should go ahead and just pick all, or allow all businesses to come in using the free market to decide which ones work in our area and which ones do not work in our area. It's pretty simple.
We don't necessarily have a job problem in Cherokee County. We have a group of graduates every year whose skill set doesn't match the needs of businesses here in Cherokee County. So what do? They have to bring in employees who live in other districts. What does that do? It increases tax revenue for other districts. We need to work on preparing our students to work in the job force in Cherokee County, as well as attracting more businesses to the county by decreasing taxes and stuff like that. So I want to make sure that we align that, potential skill set of the student with what's needed by the businesses in the community.
78% of our county residents leave our county to go to work. For the last year, I've driven down to Smyrna, Georgia to go to work. I'll tell you, it didn't matter if I left at 6 o'clock in the morning or if I left at 8 o'clock in the morning. I got to work at 9 o'clock in the morning. So the Dunkin' Donuts out down on Town Lake Parkway got a lot of my business at about 8 o'clock every morning. And so transportation issue, a lot of these issues are interrelated, but as far as the job market is concerned, we absolutely need to take a look at the things that we can do, and they all center around really creating an environment that businesses welcome in. There's been about 6 initiatives at the state level under Governor Deal this year. One of those was House Bill 386, which looked at reducing tax on the cost of energy for manufacturing. We've watched manufacturing run out of this country. When I was a kid, I grew up, and please don't hold this against me, I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. But I left Detroit a long time ago, and I've lived here over half of my life, and I have kids here, okay? So, but manufacturing in those days, it was huge. You couldn't go anywhere. There wasn't a tool and die company, there wasn't, and it's been amazing. And for years we said, we're an information economy. That's not going to be important anymore. Well, guess what? We're finding out it's real important. And if we ever have to go to war or defend our country and we can't make a screw to fix that plane, we're going to actually find out that we're in real trouble. The #1 job right now, shortage in the United States, is commercial welders. This ties into education and integrated approach to vocational education with our high schools, things that we could do that would actually lower cost of education and would deliver the skills necessary to support that kind of economic growth, along with reducing tax burden and unnecessary regulation on businesses in our county. And in commensurate with that, reducing the cost of government so that, no, we don't have to make it up in additional taxes. And that's very possible, because when you grow the pie, guess what happens? You get more taxes.
1 second, I'm going to make sure we get everybody. I see everybody who's got their hand raised. Steve?
This is kind of a follow-up to that question. I actually had the opportunity to live in Switzerland back in 1993. I was a young man. And their counties, they called them cantons, were fiercely independent. They didn't like anybody telling them how to regulate their lives and their businesses. So in the Georgia Constitution, there is, I think it's Article 9, something about home rule. And what I'd like to know from candidates is, what do you guys think about this idea of home rule and counties pretty much running themselves and not sending money to the state in order for the state to figure out how to redistribute it back?
Government should be as local as possible. Period. That's just how I feel anyway. And Switzerland's doing that, and they're probably successful with it. So government should be as local as possible. And that goes from national to the state, to the county, to the city.
Reiterate, government should be local. What you're talking about, I think, is really applicable to a situation like our school system, our school funding. Cherokee County is now a donor county under QBE. We send money to the state. We don't get everything back when they redistribute it. I know our school system would love to keep the tax money that we collect. That I would support that. Now, you're talking about an overhaul of the funding formula in the state of Georgia, but at the same time, Cherokee County should be able to take advantage of our tax base we have created. So, in response to your question, local control is the best control. Keeping local funds, tax funds within the county to assist the taxpayers of the county is what I support. Again, though, it's going to take a restructuring of some of the laws, but I would support that type of restructuring.
You know, what is this work? There we go. In business, I thank you, man. Sweet. In business, I ran a division. We worked to implement an accountability program, and it was interesting. It happens in business, it happens in the family, it happens in a church, and it happens in government. And that is when people are held accountable, and there's a process in place to measure performance and to hold people accountable to those measurements, you get results. I went in front of Charles Schwab, who we all know is a broker. We sold a profitability solution in Mountain California, and the problem he presented to us was this. He said, my divisional managers come in, nobody under them is accountable. He said, they each tell me their division is profitable. And at the end of the quarter, I looked at them all and say, and he used different language, but he said, if you guys are all profitable, why am I losing money? And so I think that the closer you get accountability to the services being delivered to the people consuming it, the easier it is to hold them accountable. So I think, you know, that we live in a federated system. The intent was for the states to be a check on the federal government, not for the federal government to run away with top-down mandates that incur debt on the states to deliver entitlements that they can't afford. So I think that the closer we move it to local control, especially on education, but on any topic, where the consumers of that product can hold those delivering it accountable, not only to deliver it, but to deliver it at a market price that's fair, equitable, and aligns with the value being delivered. That's the best scenario. So I would support that approach. And you know, I've never been to Switzerland, but that's great. So.
I also believe in local control, but I see value in working with counties around us because, let's face it, we have, you know, if in Cherokee County, if you ranked us against the rest of the states in the nation, we'd be 15th. We're not representative of the entire state of Georgia, which continually ranks 50th. We would be much more towards the top. But I do see value in educating all of Georgians. It's great that we have a good educational system here in Cherokee County, and I think that we should be able to work with those around us when it comes to things like infrastructure, transportation, education, so that we know that everyone around us is receiving quality education, quality infrastructure, stuff like that. It's an investment in our future. We have to make sure that Cherokee County is not a pocket of, you know, thriving business and thriving education, and then everywhere around us is dilapidated.
Okay, Melinda, you had a question? Melinda, yeah.
This question is for you, Ms. Bello. I understand that you are a teacher at Creekside, and if elected, the election's January the 7th, what is your plan as far as your classroom versus representing us downtown?
That's a great question, and to be honest, it's not the first time I've heard it because I know people are concerned. I will tell you I have the full support of my students. They're excited. They're learning just as I'm learning through this whole process. There is a lot of technology available to teachers today, and a lot of teachers utilize this technology without even being representatives. It's what we call the flipped classroom, where they are doing a lot of homework type stuff in the classroom, being able to collaborate and work together, and then also utilizing online learning communities where they can have access to my input as well. And then my goal is going to be to film lecture that they can view either at school or at home. It would be available to them when needed, and I would be able to answer questions through email and online communities. So kind of like education, social media, if you will, how we can all communicate through Facebook and Twitter 24/7, but there are educational tools that we can use so that they can ask questions and work collaboratively with me and each other. And there would be a long-term sub in the position who would offer some consistency for them.
I think, Cindy, you had a question?
I would like to ask each of you how you feel about Common Core.
Megan says, in the fairness of, in the light of fairness, I need to start this, which is true. Cindy, I think you're probably going to hear similar from this entire group because I've listened to them. The Common Core, the federal standards that are being imposed on local school systems, I'm going to be uncharacteristically non-verbose and say that I would oppose it, vehemently oppose it. I think it runs in the opposite direction, and having homeschool, which at the time we did it was kind of like, you know, flying to Mars. People looked at you like, you're doing what? You're crazy, you know. But we did it, not because we had any issue with the public school. As I've said, we're very involved in public schools, and I'm a product of the public school. But we wanted very much to set the standards for our children in terms of what the outcome of that education was going to look like. And so we got to pick and choose, and I'm grateful to have been doing it at a time when I didn't have, you know, and hopefully it's the case now, there aren't any restrictions in Georgia on that. We were able to do just as we wanted, and that's that. So I would totally oppose and do oppose the Common Core curriculum.
All right, Common Core. I compare Common Core as something similar to Obamacare. We don't really know what it is. There's a lot of rumors about it. I'll say this, in theory, it's probably a great idea that we could take pluck a student from Georgia and put them in California, Arkansas, Maine, choose a state, and they would be in the same curriculum. That's the goal of Common Core. Practical application, it's not possible. You can't have a one-size-fits-all educational standard across each state, each individual geographic area. It simply won't work. Great idea, impossible in practical application. If you believe in local control, I cannot see how you could believe in Common Core. So my basis is, no, I would oppose something like Common Core because I think the educational standards for a community need to be set by that community and not by the Department of Education in Washington, D.C.
Okay, Common Core is not a curriculum. It's a set of standards, and I can tell you firsthand experience being in the classroom as a social studies educator, it has not impacted what I do on a daily basis. I still develop my own lesson plans. I still research activities and supplemental materials and, educate the students in the way that best meets their needs. I know my students, I have 151 of them, so it does take some research getting to know them well. But I feel that my role in the classroom has not been changed that much. I also believe that if we were to scrap the system entirely and start over, it might be cost prohibitive as far as what we're going to come up with to replace it, because we all know they're going to come up with something to replace it. So I don't think that we should scrap it. I think we should continue to let teachers have control in their classroom, develop the lessons, research stuff, and do what they think is necessary, work with parents, work with on-site administrators and counselors and all that to meet the needs of the students, and we do a pretty good job with that. And then I wanted to follow up, I'm so sorry, to the last question. I just was thinking about what you asked. You weren't necessarily asking about my students. You're asking about you, the voter, and how I'm going to represent you and continue to maintain my job. And it is my goal to go and be the voice of the people, and I will listen just as I listen to my parents and students and all that about education. I'm going to listen to you guys about what you want and take that down to the Gold Dome. But there is a plan in place to where I can do both, and plenty of people, I think, up here have jobs and continue to keep their jobs while they are legislators.
A bureaucrat sitting in some dingy building somewhere setting standards for our children doesn't sit well with me at all. The idea of top-down, be it from the federal government or from the state government or from anything, doesn't sit well with me either. I oppose Common Core, anything like Common Core. Having, I think Nate mentioned, a one-size-fits-all, it's going to fit no one. Those standards that try to apply to all children won't work. You have children that have mental deficiencies that don't allow them to learn at the same rates. You have gifted students who learn at an accelerated rate if you let them. And Common Core and similar things dumb it down, and it has no choice but to go to a lower common denominator, making the best and brightest suffer, frustrating those who are slower to learn. Education has been evolving for decades, and it will always evolve. There's always new methodologies in education. And if you have a set of standards, you're going to be teaching to the test. If you're teaching to this test that are some set of standards, then you're not going to be evolving education. You're going to look and experiment. If you have local control, free market solutions, which basically says, get your hands off of it, then different areas can try different things. The things that work will be adopted by other areas. The things that don't work will die on the vine. So I'm opposed to Common Core.
All right. Was there any other question over there? And I know Eric had one initially.
That's a question. If any of you is elected to office, what one thing can, based on your research, we count on you accomplishing for the district? What one specific thing do you think that you feel like you would accomplish if you were elected?
You couldn't hear the
Nate, we'll go ahead and
Have
start
a
with you.
question.
He asked, what one specific thing would they work on to accomplish if they were elected? So Nate, we'll start with you.
Okay. My first priority going in would be to grow the economy and provide jobs. The protection of our rights is a given. Protection of the right to life is a given with me. But I think that where the action needs to occur is to get Georgia's economy going and this local economy. So whatever steps I could take to do that, that's what I want to do. That's the fuel for a community. In my business here in Canton, my law practice, I'm a small business owner. So I understand, when you pay the bills, when you pay employees, what happens, the stresses that you're under. In my business, with my clientele, I have noticed suffering and the restraints on the purse strings of the citizens of this community. They're hurting. And it's gotten a little bit better, but it hasn't gotten a lot better. It hasn't gotten to where it was prior to the fall. And that's what we have to work to get back to. That's what we have to do to provide jobs. And so that's going to be my focus when I go into office.
Jeff?
Eric, the impact, economic growth, I've been saying all along is key. It really addresses a lot of issues that we have. In sales, we say, sales covers a multitude of sins. Now, I'm not suggesting that be the approach to governance, but I will say that when an economy is growing, you have a lot of things to work with. If you don't, when people are suffering and you're having to cut programs, some of those programs need to be cut. But when it's done without rationale or thought, out of desperation, it can be really hurtful. So when I look at our local economy, I have been involved, what I do for a living, I'm Senior Vice President of Business Development. I go into a company, I look at the core competency of the company, and I look at extensions within products, across product lines, in new markets, related markets, market affinities, and we begin to coordinate that effort with other businesses in those fields that we can leverage and create partnerships with. I think the number one thing that I want to avoid is quasi-public-private partnerships where public funds, and we've seen some of this in this county, are used sometimes with great intentions, but we haven't gotten the results we wanted. And I'm not sure it's really the primary role. In fact, I am sure it's not the role of government. The government can facilitate, create an environment where businesses can grow, free markets, free people can pursue whatever they want, and what works as consumers pick products that deliver services that they value, what works will grow. And that's the formula that we lived with up until the last 25 to 30 years. And of course, when Ronald Reagan came on the scene, he was made fun of for talking like a free market person. And thankfully, the people were smart enough to listen to that. And I think in the county, the way to turn this around is not that you look nationally at GDP. That GDP has nothing to do with how it's real wages, and real wages are not going up. And people are leaving this county to get work. They're clogging the expressways because there's nowhere else to go. And when they buy lunch, guess where the tips go? They go to Cobb County, they go to Fulton County, they go down into Atlanta. Great counties, love those people, they're my neighbors. But I'd like to keep some of that here and I'd like to grow that opportunity here locally.
Yep. Sam, we're gonna, 2 more answers, I want to get you.
The question was, what's the first thing you would work on, right?
One thing you think you could accomplish.
Okay. There are 2 bills that are being set up. As a freshman coming in, runoff, as a freshman coming in later on, we're not going to have very much ability to drive legislation, so I'm not going to tell you that I'm going to try to do this pie in the sky stuff. But there are 2 pieces of legislation going through. One is against Obamacare. The other one is HB 195. It's a transportation bill. That bill allows counties to work with each other. Counties currently can't work with each other on transportation, and instead they do an in-run by having these regionalism, basically, these SWATs and things like that. They're basically raise taxes. So if we can pass 195, then we can do an end run around their end run and hopefully stave off future tax increases. Obamacare is the single largest thing that this district cares about. I know because I've talked to, my team has talked to 3,000 people so far, face to face. And that's what they say, 75% of Obamacare. And so the bill is basically saying that we're not going to do the unfunded mandate of enforcing Obamacare for the federal government, but to answer further a question, that's only halfway there. I think we need to tell the federal government we're not going to let them enforce Obamacare in Georgia and take it all away. We have our 10th Amendment right to do so, and it's about time somebody's in there and use it.
Thanks. Thank
I'm going to follow up with what Sam said. I believe in the 10th Amendment. I believe it gives us the right to nullify Obamacare. Individually, I've seen over my last few years of employment the cost of insurance as a result of some of the things that have gone on quadruple. So that would be something I would definitely work to accomplish, is decrease the cost of health insurance for Georgians by utilizing our 10th Amendment right.
All right, and we'll have our last question from Judy.
I'd like to know what your thoughts are, the zero tolerances in a school. It seems terribly radical for kids. I'd like to get your input as to what you would reject, maybe, to bring some common sense back to that.
Okay, we'll go ahead and start on the left with Megan and work our way down.
Judy, thank you for the question. My dad told me a long time ago that zero tolerance means zero common sense. And we need to empower the educators and the administrators to deal with kids. Their disciplinary needs are the same as their educational needs. They're different for every student. And we need to make sure that they have the power to deal with those students to meet their needs.
Judy, I would concur. I think that with your statement, I think that that it takes all reasoned approach out of the process of dealing with kids and dealing with issues in schools. I think it is a malay in our culture in general that Samuel Adams sorry, one of our presidents, I think it is. No, it's not. Our third president, let me say that, made the statement that when you take a people and you remove from them their ability to make personal moral judgments, you have to increase the burden of law. And we live in a litigated society where we're trying to fix every problem on the personal level and private level with more and more laws and litigation. And you see it in schools. You see them taking the control out of the hands of parents, out of the hands of teachers, and centralizing it at a higher and higher and higher level. And I think that it's an example of a movement away from kind of local control and parental involvement. And I think that when a kid points his finger at Sally and makes a hand motion with a gun playing cops and robbers and he's suspended for 3 weeks, I think, yeah, and possibly labeled a felon. We have the same problem with common sense sentencing movements here in the state of Georgia. You've got to stop to say, where are we on this? You know, so I am very much in favor of kind of backing away from that and taking what is a more traditional approach of involving parents and common sense and dealing with those kind of issues rather than imposing those kind of arbitrary standards and rules.
Nate?
Zero tolerance is an unrealistic approach to real problems. In my experience, and I have some firsthand with this, because when I first came to Cherokee County, I worked for a law firm of, at that point in time, it was Roach and Geiger, which was the school system attorneys. And we conducted tribunal hearings, and I saw it in its real application. Also, my wife being on the school board, she told me stories of its application as cases were appealed to her. I can tell you that because of the zero tolerance rule, I know of a little girl who was suspended from school for a lengthy period of time for simply having Tylenol. It's not a right standard. If we believe in local control, which I do, what we have to do is place our trust back in the teachers, back in the administrators' hands, to handle these issues on a case-by-case basis, instead of saying you have an overarching philosophy that you have to follow, a hard line, and past that line, everyone receives this punishment. It's not a one-size-fits-all problem, and it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all solution. Trust. Like I said, we have to instill back, and zero tolerance, I see as an across-the-board problem, not just for the students, but you have zero tolerance laws that apply even to parents who come on campus. If a parent has a knife, or if a parent has a carry permit, has a gun, we have to put trust back in society. And all these restrictions I see as just another liberal ploy to chip away at our personal and individual rights, and we have to chip back. We have to stop it.
Sam?
I actually agree with zero tolerance. For one thing only, zero tolerance. We shouldn't tolerate it at all. It takes common sense out of it as being unsafe. But zero tolerance is only one prong of many issues. 3 strikes laws, for example. It's the same thing. We have a court system, we have a judge, we have juries. They should have the freedom to make decisions based on that. But instead, we have a 3 strikes law, for example, that says, no, we don't trust that. We don't think that if a judge knows about prior convictions when he's handing down a sentence that we can trust him with that. Let's go ahead and take that away from him. Let's put that in the hands of the state legislators who have never seen this person, maybe some wayward 17-year-old that just needs a little bit more attention at home or something. No, we're going to go ahead and throw him down the lion's den because he happened to do something bad 3 times, even though that last thing might be something extremely minor. There's so many things that are illegal. I mean, we're probably violating 15 laws just sitting here. That the 3 strikes laws, there's no telling what people do. But zero tolerance laws for the teachers, in the schools, society, there's no point for it whatsoever. The Founding Fathers gave us the court system, and anything that we do to undermine that is not in our best interest.
All right. Well, thank you all. Please join me in welcoming, or thanking them rather, for being here tonight.